Muy buenas tardes. Sean ustedes bienvenidos a la conferencia magistral que con el título de las múltiples dimensiones de la cartografía, cartografía en cuarta dimensión y más, impartirá el doctor Fraser Taylor, que es muy conocido de toda la comunidad geográfica, no solo nacional, sino internacional, reconocido ampliamente como uno de los más grandes cartógrafos a nivel mundial. El doctor Taylor hizo su MA y su PhD en geografía en la Universidad de Edimburgo, así como posgrados en universidades de Londres y de Harvard. En 2008 fue elegido miembro de la Real Sociedad del Canadá. En 2012 galardonado por la Real Sociedad Geográfica Canadiense y el Premio 3M a la Innovación Ambiental de Canadá para reconocer a las personas destacadas en contribuciones innovadoras que ayuden a Canadá y a los canadienses en el cambio ambiental. Actualmente es profesor distinguido de investigación en Relaciones Internacionales, Geografía y Estudios Ambientales de la Universidad de Carleton en Ottawa, Canadá, de donde también es director de Geomática y del Centro de Investigación Cartográfica. Entre sus más recientes publicaciones, en 98 publica Temas políticos en cartografía moderna, en 2005 Cibercartografía, teoría y práctica, de la que es editor y colaborador, y en 2012 Elsevier le solicita una reversión revisada de este libro de 2005 que en inglés se llama Developments in Cyber Cartography, Applications and Indigenous Mapping. En 2011 el doctor Taylor fue invitado a presidir el Grupo Asesor Internacional de Alto Nivel sobre Infraestructura de Datos Espaciales del Ártico. Ha sido vicepresidente de la Asociación Cartográfica Internacional entre 1984 y 87, presidente de la misma en 87-95, miembro de su comité ejecutivo en 95-99, presidente de la Unión Internacional de Topografía y Cartografía de 89 a 93, es miembro también de la Cartografía África del Grupo de Trabajo Africanos de la misma Asociación Cartográfica Internacional, ha sido secretario tesorero de la Asociación Canadiense de Estudios Africanos y presidente de la Cartografía Canadiense entre 1978 y 79. En este amplio currículum, si sigo diciéndolo, quizás ya no te deje tiempo para dar la última parte de tu conferencia, pero no quiero dejar de mencionar que en 1992, cuando el INEGI hizo su primer intento grande de modernización en geografía, y aquí creo que hay muchos de los que quedan de esa época, el doctor Taylor fue uno de los asesores externos, uno de los muy pocos, eran solo dos, que vinieron a asesorar al INEGI en esa parte, así que es un viejo amigo del INEGI, viejo amigo de México. Démosle la bienvenida, por favor, doctor Taylor, bienvenido.
Buenos días a todos. Muchas gracias, señor Palma. My topic today is the multiple dimensions of cartography, four-dimensional cartography, and more. But before beginning my presentation, I would like to offer some observations on the development of cartography and geographic information processing in Mexico. I first came into contact directly with INEGI in 1987 when the International Cartographic Association held its meeting in Morelia. At that time, the Director of Geography, Nestor Duchgari, who is with us here today, was Vice President of the ICA and played a very important role in organizing the conference and drawing attention to INEGI's achievements in cartography at that time. I was particularly struck by one of the means that INEGI used to finance the conference in 1987. It all depended on the price of silver. Silver was a byproduct of the mapping process, and the organizing committee was given the proceeds of the byproduct of silver in order to help finance the conference. It also brought me into touch with the phrase just-in-time response, because very often at the very last minute, Nestor had to change the program because something had changed beyond his control. And I have very fond memories of my first contact with INEHI. After that, my contact with Mexico has continued. I'm here at least once a year, sometimes twice. So I have a very good opportunity to watch the development of what is happening in INEHI and what is also happening in cartography and geographic information processing in Mexico in general. As Senor Palma mentioned in my introduction, I was involved in the assessment of the big modernization project for the Geography Division of INEHI, which, if I recall correctly, was above $20 million worth and was a very large project for the time. My role was one of external advisor to the very effective teams being built by INEHI to analyze the various bids that came in from various consortia all over the world. And I remember being particularly impressed by the quality of the work that INEHI staff did in that particular event. Since that time, I have watched the development of INEHI through a series of National Geography Days and other interactions with presidents and other senior officials inside INEHI, until we reached the stage where INEHI is today. And I very much appreciate the opportunity and the welcome by INEHI to address this conference. For those of you who have not seen the very impressive cartographic exhibit, map exhibit downstairs, I would encourage you to go there to see the impressive development that has happened over the years in mapping in Mexico, for which INEHI and all Mexicans can be very proud. Now, INEHI is only one of the major actors in cartography in Mexico. There are many other actors, several of whom are making presentations at this meeting here. At the state level, I've been impressed by the work being done in Querétaro, and also the new and very important initiative being carried out in the state of Puebla, which is advancing quite rapidly. At the city level, there are a number of very good and very impressive developments. For example, the information system of Distrito Federal here in Mexico is very impressive. We heard yesterday, too, about some of the enterprise mapping and geographic information processing systems that are being developed. I was particularly impressed by the work that's being done by Pemex in this respect. At the academic level, I've had the pleasure of working with Central Geo over a number of years. They're doing an excellent job. They have just launched a new journal, an electronic journal, with many of the articles in Spanish. They have an impressive master's and PhD program, and they have also run for INEHI a professional master's program for INEHI staff. So all in all, as you will have gathered from the presentations made in various sessions here, cartography and geographic information processing in Mexico is in very good shape. Important developments are being made. There are, however, still many challenges. One of them, I think, is to try to link together in a more coherent fashion the many individual initiatives that are going on in Mexico. I think that the collective result of linking, either in an interoperable fashion or at least in a complementary fashion, a number of individual efforts would in fact lead to a faster development of the field. So all in all, I have every confidence that Mexico is moving ahead, and this conference is a very important step in the direction of Mexico's work at both the national and the international level. Now let me turn to my presentation, which I have entitled The Multiple Dimensions of Cartography, Four-Dimensional Cartography, and More. Traditional cartography has been largely 2- or 3-dimensional, mainly 2-dimensional. Modern cartography is multi-dimensional. Certainly, the fourth dimension, that of time, is being used, but that is only one of the many dimensions of modern cartography which I want to talk about today. Now, the importance of time cannot be underestimated. For example, when Jack Dangermond and a number of others outlined the number of societal challenges that we face today, such as climate change, environmental change, and so on and so forth, I found myself wondering how on earth we can possibly deal with those challenges unless we have information over time. Change over time is absolutely vital to look at trends, both forwards and backwards, in order to have more effective responses and policies. If you do not have good quality information over time, then your ability to analyze, present, plan is severely limited. Now, one of the difficulties with cartography, particularly in the information era, is that there has been, I think, an over-interest in technology and not enough interest in other things which are equally, if not more important. For example, when we look at the importance of archiving and preserving the information we need over time, then we run into a serious problem. For example, in Canada, the large majority of the digital mapping and the geographic information processing of the last quarter of the 20th century has disappeared and is no longer usable. I can get maps from the Middle Ages on paper more easily than I can get usable data from the databases of the late 19th, 20th, and early 21st century. That is because people are not paying attention to the importance of archiving in our systems. I have heard very few presentations here which take into account the need to look at the availability of information over time and to build into our systems, into the life cycle of our systems, an effective archiving and preservation policy. If we do not, then the use of cartography and geographic information processing as an analytical tool will be very seriously jeopardized. Why do people not do this? One, it's expensive. Two, it's not very interesting. Computer programmers have a habit of overwriting the old version and simply putting in the new one, forgetting that in the old one there are important pieces of information. And as a result, many major enterprises and many major activities have been lost to us because we can no longer access the data, either because the technology has changed, or because the metadata is inadequate, or because nobody has bothered to effectively archive. Now, archiving is not the same as backup, and many computer programmers think that if I back things up, I have preserved it. They have not. The importance of metadata, particularly contextual metadata, cannot be overemphasized in this respect. So time is an element, and a very important element. And unless we take it into account, we are less likely to be successful in our endeavors. Now let me move on. No one who's been at this conference can doubt the increasing centrality of location in everyday life. We've had example after example of how location-based information is central to all kinds of things in society. The quotation by Stephen Lawler of Bing Maps is self-evident to people in this room. He talks about the rapidly growing world of data and locational data and locational services. Just how important this is in economic terms is worth examining. Here are two recent studies, market studies, commissioned by Google. I first introduced this slide and a series of slides which are following at the Geospatial World Forum on monetizing the value of geospatial information, organized and run by Geospatial Media Communications. Sanjay Kumar, who is the leader of that activity, is in the audience today. And Geospatial Media is doing an excellent job of looking at the private sector involvement in our field and in monetizing and looking at the value of these things. I think some of the figures may surprise you when you look at the economic impact. But first, to give some context, the advent of GPS and mapping services on demand, such as Google, Bing, and others, revolutionized the field. More people heard of and used Google Maps in the first 3 weeks of the launch than heard of or used GIS in 3 decades. Why? Because that service was meeting an individual societal need, whereas GIS had become the specialists' way of dealing with things as opposed to the public's way of dealing with things, and we tended to talk to each other, not to other people. Now, let me look at some of the figures attached to these impact studies. This one is from the United States study. Now, they looked at geospatial services, which are services using location as part of the service, and they looked at the geospatial industry, that is, the companies producing geospatial industrial products. In 2011, the geospatial industry generated $73 billion in revenues and over 500,000 high-wage jobs. Geospatial services built on location generated $1.6 trillion in revenues and was used on a daily basis by 5.3 million workers, which was over 4% of the US workforce. In addition, US consumers place a direct value on geospatial services of $37 billion annually. Geo applications and location-enabled devices are central to daily life in the US. The methodology to arrive at these figures included a survey of over 1,000 business leaders from across the United States. When I look at things on the global level, I want to go back one, it considered both the world impact, the economic impact on the world economy and consumer welfare. They divided the study into three categories: direct effects, that is revenue generated by firms, plus the value added; consumer effects, benefits to consumers, businesses, and government from using geoservices; and the wider economic effects, improved efficiency elsewhere in the economy by cost savings and new products and services. And the study quantified these and attached a monetary value to them. The direct effects: $150 to $270 billion revenue generated annually, $113 billion value added, which works out at 0.2% of the world's gross domestic product, at that time of 70 trillion. For consumer effects, they looked at two examples: journey time and fuel savings from improved navigation, and estimated $22 billion per year. Education and information, a further $12 billion. The wider economic or supply side effects: cost savings and improved efficiency, not captured in the market and financial transactions, GPS 10 billion, time savings 17 billion, and so on and so forth. The other point about the market studies is that they showed that the sector is growing very rapidly indeed. At 30% per annum was the estimate. So already, these annual estimates are well out of date. A study is only as good as the methodology used to create it. Anyone can pull numbers out of a hat, but you have to examine very carefully what methodology was used to arrive at those numbers. A carefully constructed methodological framework based on a comparative approach to studies of other industrial sectors. They gave a comparative order of magnitude to the economic impact by providing a range of estimates based on the best information available. As with all economic impact studies, the accuracy depends to some extent on the validity of the economic assumptions and the methodologies used. But to my knowledge, this is the first attempt to quantify the impact of the global geospatial industry and location-based services at the global level. Now, the reality of modern society is that cost, economics, plays a key role. In talking with decision makers and politicians, if the size of the economic impact is so significant, then they are likely to pay attention. If it was less significant, they would pay less attention. That is why attaching monetary values to these things has some use. Now, this morning, Vanessa Lawrence gave a list of impressive local scale results and savings in the UK context. These things operate at a variety of different levels, and very often, since the old phrase is that all politics is local, if you have local examples of substantial cost savings, This can have an impact on the way people view the value of what you're doing. I've coined the phrase, the age of location. In this rapidly growing age of location, maps and mapping can be central. In fact, are central. But we must extend the dimensions of cartography, both in technical and particularly in conceptual terms, and create new multidimensional maps and new applications. It's not the technology which is key here. The representation and use of time, for example, is relatively easy in a technical sense. The fourth dimension, time, is necessary but not sufficient, in my view. We need an integrated, holistic mapping and mapping processes using technology, but not driven by technology. The technical bells and whistles are the easy part. The conceptual and integrative challenges are much more difficult. I argue that cartography must be a central part of location-based technology. In fact, cartography is a location-based service, if you think about it. This is a quote from my friend and colleague David Schell of the Open Geospatial Consortium. He's now Chairman Emeritus of OGC. But he makes a very important point. He argues that geospatial technology has become a property of information processing itself, flowing around domain after domain like oil in a huge machine, looking to each to be integral with the science and information models that drive it. GIS is no longer a focal concept. Indeed, a whole, that should be new set, not net set, of actors has taken an interest in spatial information, not as participants in a traditionally defined geospatial market, but as institutions representing diverse industrial or societal domains. In other words, location-based technologies are now ubiquitous, and the map, which is a central part of location-based technologies, is now ubiquitous, or even more ubiquitous than it once was. We're no longer off in one corner, acting as GIS specialists, cartographic specialists, geospatial specialists. We are part of a much wider, or should be part, of a much wider movement towards the more effective use of location, and I'm arguing that cartography is central to this whole process. Now, Sir Tim Berners-Lee, when asked 2 or 3 years ago, what is the future of the web, made 2 points. The future web must link data sets on disparate topics, and we've heard many examples of the importance of doing that during this conference. We've heard less about how to display information in innovative new ways. Now, the work we are doing in our own center, and in fact, a lot of work going on in cartography in general, does both of these. The map is an ideal way to link data sets on disparate topics, both quantitative and qualitative. It's also, with a little bit of imagination, an extension of the dimensions of cartography into a multidimensional approach, a very innovative way of presenting information in ways that people can understand. Some 1 or 2 examples of some recent observations on map making. This is from Ola Roland, the president and CEO of Hexagon. A map in isolation is quite useless, but when you add activity to it, it becomes commercially valuable. If I create the world's most accurate map and nothing more, I probably won't find anyone willing to pay for it. Another industrial observation. The biggest challenge is to integrate all the data, both spatial and non-spatial, residing in different sources, into a manageable environment for unified viewing in real time. Another observation from Nokia. We would redefine map mapping through computation cartography. This means that maps are created on demand to meet a specific purpose, to help govern an individual action, or to help answer a personal question. Now, these are all very interesting observations. But when I look back at what a map really is, I'm using some quotations from Woodward and Lewis from the History of Cartography series. Maps are both material artifacts and metaphors for encoding spatial understanding. The map is at the junction of performance and artifact, of the visual and the oral, of the static and the dynamic. Maps are more than just ever-improving representations of the geographical world. The map is a cognitive system. It indicates how people are thinking about space and their environment. The map is, of course, part of a material culture. We produce maps as material objects. Maps are also social constructs. They're designed to tell a story, to impact, to give a perspective, often a critical perspective, on events. Now, Harley and Woodward argue that all three are necessary in order to understand how things function, how maps function in society. And the map as an artifact is only a small part of the general history of communications about space. Now, I deal with something which I call cyber cartography, and I've defined it in very simple terms. It's the application of geographic information processing to the analysis of topics of interest to society and the display of the results in ways that people can readily understand. There are 7 elements. It's multisensory. It uses vision, hearing, touch, and eventually smell and taste. It uses multimedia formats and new telecommunications technologies such as the web, such as Web 2.0 and now 3.0, and of course increasingly on mobile devices. It's highly interactive and engages the user in new ways. It's user-centric, understanding and engaging the user in new ways through user needs analysis and usability studies. I work very closely with human factors and human-computer interaction specialists. It's also entertaining. I think Jörg Gardner mentioned the other day in his presentation the importance of maps as entertainment. Edutainment, online educational games based on the map, are becoming increasingly popular. And the division between the user and the map creator has changed dramatically. And increasingly, cyber cartographic users are in fact becoming creators. Cybercartography is not a standalone product like the traditional map, but part of an information analytical package, including both qualitative and quantitative information. The Cybercartographic Atlas framework we have developed provides an organizational approach for the emerging products and processes of the Web 2.0 era of social computing. Fifthly, it's compiled by teams of individuals, typically from different domains, including disciplines not normally associated with cartography. I have artists, musicians, psychologists, computer scientists, English literature specialists, all working together with cartographers and geographers in the creation of our products. It's applied to a wide range of topics, not only to location finding and the physical environment, and it responds to societal demands, including topics which have not usually been mapped. And it involves new research and development, partnerships among academia, government, civil society, and the private sector. There are 6 central ideas contained in those 7 elements. First, people use all of their senses in learning. Consequently, cybercartography creates representations which allow them to use as many senses as they wish through cybercartographic atlases. People learn in different ways and prefer teaching and learning materials in different formats. Cybercartographic atlases provide people with a choice of learning styles or combination of learning styles. The same information is presented in multiple formats. Some people like maps. Some people like graphs. Some people like videos. Some people like to listen to stories. Some people like to combine different types of learning styles. We present the information in a way where you can choose which method you want or which combination of methods you want. Effective teaching and learning, as the educational specialists have told us for many years, takes place when individuals are actively involved and engaged. The multimedia and interactive approaches used in cybercartographic atlases facilitate this. People need the power to create their own narratives, their own stories, their own ways of looking at things. This is part of the social computing revolution. The Cybercartographic Atlas framework we've built is called Nunalit, which means community in Inuktitut, the language of the Inuit. It's an approach which is not based on a schema, it's schemaless, based on Couch database, and the objective is to be able to ingest all kinds of information, regardless of what kind of information that is. Whether it's an Inuit elder talking, whether it's a video, whether it's a map, whether it's a book, whether it's a text. And above all, it's a means of allowing people to create their own input. All you need to do to be able to use the Nunalit cybercartographic framework is to be able to press a button on a keyboard. You do not need to be a geographic information specialist. We discovered that in a little workshop that we were doing in the north, where 3 young kids were hanging around the door. They said, "What are you doing?" So we told them. They said, "We want to put our lake on that map." We said, "Well, what do you mean our lake?" "That's the one we fish in. We call it Dead Dog Lake." So as they were 11 and 12-year-olds, it only took them 15 minutes to learn how to use the system. Had they been a university graduate, it would have taken much longer. But they were able to come and put their information in directly without being specialists in the field. If we do not allow cartography, particularly cybercartography, to escape from the role of the specialist, who will not be meeting the needs of the future, or for that matter, for the present. Our framework also allows us to give some structure and metadata to the information that people are creating. The framework is open source and readily available, and as I said, it allows ordinary people to create their own narratives. Many topics of interest to society are very complex. There is no simple right or wrong answer to many questions, such as global warming and climate change. To understand these complexities, different ontologies or different ways of looking at things or different narratives on the same topic should be presented in ways that people can easily understand without privileging one over the other. Cybercartographic atlases do this. Of particular importance is giving voices to local people. They can speak for themselves rather than have others speak for them. There's been a shift from map user to map creator, which establishes new forms of democratized teaching and learning. The Cybercartographic Atlas framework helps to democratize mapping in new ways and provide a framework for volunteer geographic information. Now, cybercartography uses the map as an organizing principle, but tries to capture a wide range of information in a variety of formats, only one of which is the map. A cybercartographic atlas is a metaphor for all kinds of quantitative and qualitative information linked by location. It combines material culture, that is, the map as an artifact. It combines social construction, the need to, in fact, act as a way of criticizing or of observing, and it's a way of organizing people's cognitive concepts in new ways. Now, let me give you one or two examples because time is running short. This is some of the work we're doing in northern Canada. You'll find that we have the usual XY coordinates. You'll find that we have photographs, videos, and a variety of other products as part of the atlas. And here is some more information that we add to the atlas. This is an atlas of trade between Canada and the United States, which is interactive and includes change over time as an integral part. We have a time bar so that you can access information at any place and any time over the last 20 or 30 years and portray the stuff visually and orally. We've introduced sound. This one is from the Sea Ice Atlas. I'll pass over that. Antarctic exploration. We use sound and time to look at the changing images of Antarctica over time. As the map changes, the sound changes, the text changes in an interactive fashion. The Sea Ice Atlas is a very important one. For the Inuit, the sea ice is an extension of the land. For people from the south, the sea ice is a barrier to navigation and resource exploitation. These are two different ontologies, two different ways of looking at things. So in our atlas, we try to gather and present the Inuit viewpoint and the southern viewpoint so that people realize it's not just a black and white, straight-cut situation. Individual Inuit elders over time provide all kinds of information for us on routes, on ice, on sea flows. That's a compendium of all of them. You can get down to the individual elder who provided the information. Interestingly enough, metadata for the Inuit is not the accuracy of the XY coordinates. It's the reputation of the individual who provided the information, which is a true sense of the metadata. We are recreating maps out of old texts. This is the Atlas of the Lake Huron Treaty process. We've taken the diaries of the old surveyors, we're creating maps from those diaries, and then retracing the route together with comments from individuals right now. This one is a place names atlas from the Gwich'in. We've developed an iPad application which allows people to go out into the field, record information, and then load it straight back into the system. The place names are a means of reclaiming people's heritage. The Gwich'in want to rename places according to their naming system, not according to the Western naming system. I'll finish up by a couple of comments. The importance of effective communication. We've got to speak to people in a language that they understand, not in jargon. Vanessa mentioned this morning. Location and place, not geospatial information processing, GIS, and all of the other jargon we surround ourselves with. Now, I apologize to those in the audience who've heard this joke before, but it goes this way. What do you get when you cross a geographic information specialist with a mafia don? The answer, an offer you do not understand. Basically, we are not communicating effectively because we're using language that people do not understand. For a decision maker, they don't know what all of this jargon means. They've got to be talked to and talked about in their own language. We also have to think about the fact that we're changing very rapidly. We're very good at dealing with technical change, but less good about dealing with societal change. That's a quote from Arab Dasgupta. The importance of the individual is now almost paramount in mapping, and we must meet those needs effectively. In conclusion, the new and multiple dimensions of cartography go well beyond 4 dimensions and are much more than just technology. We need to include new conceptual dimensions in a more holistic way. The centrality and importance of maps and mapping have never been so great. Cartography has an exciting present and future. Maps are everywhere and are meeting individual and societal needs in a plethora of new ways. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your attention.
Tenemos unos minutos para contestar algunas preguntas. No sé si alguien del público quisiera preguntar algo. Por favor, levanten la mano para verlos bien. Sí, ¿alguna persona? Creo que es una muy buena invitación para reflexionar sobre dónde nos encontramos y a dónde vamos en la geografía por uno de los más grandes expertos. Espero que esto no me los haya dejado demasiado aturdidos ante las futuras preguntas. No tendríamos ninguna pregunta, por favor. Si no fuera el caso, voy a aprovechar para entregarle un diploma al doctor Taylor. Si alguien decide en el intervenir. Muchas gracias a todos.